Hi, welcome to another edition of Legal Quilts. Today we're going to be sewing the blocks of the Bargello that I showed you how to do the prep for, where we sewed the strips together and then we cut the tubes. Sewed the tube and then cut them. That's most of the prep work. After that it gets much easier. What you're going to notice though is, instead of the beachy fabrics I'm working with, we're now going to be working with the actual quilt I'm trying to finish, which is the snowfall one. Now, one thing I didn't do was I didn't measure my panel first before I decided how big I was going to make my blocks, so my blocks don't quite fit on the panel, but it's an easy fix. I'm just going to sew some pieces on the vertical sides of the on the panel, and it'll be wide enough, and then it takes care of it. So first things first, measure your panel, figure out what size blocks you want to use, and cut your pieces accordingly. I didn't, so I've got 2.5 inches, 2 inches, and 1.5 inch pieces. Okay, and then, but you've got your panel. I'm using this small panel as an example. You've got your panel. Decide how you want to do this. Do you want to emphasize the horizontal, or do you want to emphasize the vertical, or do you just want to do a log cabin where you're going around? Figure out what you want to do. In my case, I like to emphasize the verticals, as we know, so I'm going to do, so I should have measured this across the horizontal first to figure out which size I needed there. Then when you figure out your vertical, you have to keep in mind that you're going to have an addition there. You're going to sew on your block, and I'm just using a strip here as an example. One of my tubes I'm using as an example. But remember now, this adds to the length of the vertical, as you can see. Okay, it's not sewn together. So you have to take that into account when you're measuring. Remember to add in a block on the top and the bottom, or 2 blocks, or however many you're going to do. And on the top and the bottom, you have to take that into account. All right. The other thing you want to do when you're laying out your tubes, always have the same color facing up. Usually color number 1. In this case, we're going from light to darkest. It helps if you think of this in halves, because you go up. You have half of it going up and then half of it going down. You can have narrower pieces, you can have wider pieces. Again, this is the 2, and for some reason I decided to do 2 2.5, 2 2.5 pieces, see, and then 2 2-inch pieces, and then 1 on the half, 1.5 inch. I don't know why I decided to do that, but I did. It's been a while since I've thought about this. I don't remember my thought process. You can do that where you have more sizes in there, or you don't do it twice at the same size, and you get a little different up and down, okay? But you want to lay it out. Lay out your tubes. And I did it 2.5, 2.5. I took my 2.5 ones and divided them into 2 stacks. And then I did the same thing for my 2-inch ones. So I've got it all laid out. Okay? And when you first do this, you want to lay out your block so that you're just working from that. After a while, when you start making these, you can just leave your tubes and you'll know what to do next. But you want to lay out your block first to make sure you get it right. So for your first one, like I said, we're going from light to dark. It doesn't matter. You can go from dark to light. You can go from the middle. If you have like a variety of colors where you're not necessarily going light to dark, like you have different patterns or something, pick pattern 1 and then pattern 6. We're going with, actually I think I've got 5 here. I've got 5 here. But your first and your last. So we're going from light to dark. Okay, so to start, you're going to take where you've got your tube, see it's a circle, you're going to separate, take your stitch ripper and separate between the lightest fabric number 1 and your last fabric, okay? And you're just going to separate them. Don't pull too hard. You can pull a little bit, but don't pull too hard, because you don't want to pull threads out of your fabric and you don't want to fray your ends. because then your block won't work as well. Just want to lay that out there. Lay it out. Okay, so you've got your lightest fabric and your darkest fabric at the bottom. Do you see that? Okay, that's your first column. You're kind of working columns on this instead of rows. So that's your first column. Then you take your second one, in this case the second 2.5 one, and you go between fabric 1, which is here, and fabric 2. You see that? It's a little hard to see because there's not a lot of difference between the two, but that's fabric 1, that's fabric 2, and you're going to separate those also so that you work with your stitch ripper a lot on this. Okay, but this is one time it's fun to work with your stitch ripper because you're using it to create instead of take out what you've already done. Right, so when you've separated them, now your second is on the top, your second fabric, and your first fabric is on the bottom. Okay. And then you go to your first 2-inch one, and this is where you really start having to pay attention. You go between fabric 2, see, I almost messed up, fabric 2 and fabric 3, and you separate those. So now your fabric 3 is on the top, and your fabric 2 is on the bottom, and your fabric 1 is now 1 up from the bottom, and your last one is 3 up from the bottom. And so yeah, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 5 fabrics. So then you go same thing between fabric 3 and 4. You separate them. Okay, so that's fabric. Yeah, that's fabric 4, and that's fabric 3 on the bottom. Okay, and then you take your smallest piece and you separate it between your last fabric, fabric 5, and fabric 4. Okay. This one goes faster because there's hardly any, because it's only 1.5 inches. Dark, light, 6, 1, 2, or 5, 4, 3, 2, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. I knew I'd get it eventually. And you lay that out. That is your first half. That's your up part of your block. Now you're going to go back down. And how do we do that? First, we're going to start at the top again. We're going to just do another one of that block that you just did with 5 at the top and 6 and 4 at the bottom, so that you get kind of a peak together, okay? You always want to make that little peak. Well, you don't always want to. Sometimes you might just say, okay, I'm done, now ready to go back down. And that gets a different kind of point depending on how big you cut yours. So this one's identical here. That's the way I'm doing it. Now then you're going back to your, what was your second 2-inch, but it's the first 2-inch here. And what you're going to do, I'm going to make sure I get this right, okay, is put your, separate between 4 and 3, just like you did before. Yeah, separate between 4 and 3. Okay, just like that. There's your fourth one, there's your third one, and go back. And then you take your second one and you separate them between 3 and 2. And you can look back on what you did before to go, okay, where does that go again? So that you can get the step in right. So this one's going to have this one on the top and this one on the bottom. You're going to check this all the time, because this is one of those ones, just like the tapestry quilt, that the order of the pieces matters a lot. If you get your layout wrong, the block isn't going to work right. So you want your layout. Your layout matters so much more. So you got 3 on the top, 2 on the bottom. Then you're going to come to your second 2.5-inch one. And again, put 2 at the top and 1 on the bottom. So you're going to look at this. And you start seeing, okay, that's fabric 1, and you want to, okay, and that's fabric 5. So you want to be here, not here, to make sure they wind up on the bottom. Again, as you go along doing this, you still have to pay attention, but it gets easier and becomes more natural. It's a little slow for me because I have to stop and make sure I'm explaining it to y'all instead of just doing it. And I still mess up, and and if you mess up, that's why we have stitch rippers, for the not good side. So again, 2, 1, and then you end just like you started, between your lightest and your darkest, with your dark on the bottom. Now, if we were just putting these Bargello blocks together into a whole quilt, well, it's still going to look cool because they're going to be 2 blocks next to each other. So these bottom dark blocks will meet. Okay, so just your original one, and there's your entire block. Now, when we put these together, you can see you're going to have your quilt like this, and then the next block, because this is basically a border on this, your next block is going to have your 2 darks next to each other. So it's going to, you can see where it's easier to trace on the dark ones. You see they come together and then they start back up. So if you were doing a whole quilt, though, they would meet here as you were doing this, and you would have something, a secondary pattern with these meeting. So this is a really nice pattern to do if you want a lot of movement in your quilt, if you want to have a lot of fun with playing with colors of shades and just doing things. Like I said, this one's snow because I like to see snow coming up and down. It's kind of like snow falling. So how do you sew your block together? Just like you sew the rows of your quilt together. You take, well, columns in this case. Take your first one with the lightest on the top and the darkest on the bottom. See? Take the second one with number 2 on the top. Just flip it over. And let me move the camera a little bit closer so maybe you can see what I'm doing for once. Okay, that helps. You'll see it, and you just sew it with the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, what do you do with all these seams here? I like to interlock them, and you can, if you want, when you open out your things, iron everything out so it makes it a little easier. Looks like it's telling me it wants to go this way. Bottom one goes up. Do you see my seam here? Bottom one goes up. Top one goes down. okay? You can do it the other way, but this just interlock your seams. And I just finger do it, but again, you can sew these if you want. You can pin your internal seams. Apparently that's a thing. Okay, let's see, up. Okay, and then just sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm just thinking, whoa, you might want to do a leader ender. I don't know today. It's been one of those days. Okay, there we go. All right. And I know I tend to hunch over my sewing machine, which is probably not good for my back, and it's definitely not good for y'all to see what I'm doing. And just sew with your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Hopefully I'm sewing here. I have this feeling I'm not. Is it sewing? Yeah. Just a second. I hate when that happens. Okay. You're there. Why aren't you actually sewing? Okay. My bobbin decided to cause trouble this time. It happens. All right. I don't want to cut the video here, so that's why you're seeing me do this, but it's okay. Just pull that in there, pull that around. Redo. See, something's not right up here, I can tell. Yep, I know what went wrong here. All right. Always know how to thread your sewing machine. Up, around, make sure all the hooks. If it's acting funky, make sure you threaded everything properly. In this case, it was threaded properly, but it worked its way out of, for some reason, it worked its way out of the top hook. I've got a friend, my friend I told you about last time, who runs the maker place. She actually repairs the sewing machines herself, and she's got the old vintage ones. She says, yeah, those are, you can figure those out, and they're not computerized and complicated. They're just purely mechanical. So she's really good about that. And she's got some cool machines to work on, to work with. Yeah, I tend to wrap my thread around the needle, which makes it pull wrong. So let's see. And yeah, I'm just talking to kill time here. Let's see. Little trick, if you're having trouble seeing your needle hole, stick your finger behind it. It blocks the light, and so you can see where it's supposed to go. One more try. We can do this. There we go. Pulled through. No knots. One thing my friend taught me is you don't want your thread. Mine automatically cut, so it's not usually a problem. But when I start out, I've got all these pieces here, this long piece. Put it out and to the left. She says hold it lightly. But if you put it out to the left, it's not going to get caught underneath and cause a problem. You can also use leaders and enders. The only reason I don't is I forget. But I did once try to remember, and I had a whole bunch of 4 patches, which made some really great quilts, which I made into a really great quilt. So leaders and enders are a good thing. So yeah, you just sew this, again, interlocking your seams so they kind of match. Jury's out on this one. There's 2 ways of doing this. There's the, oh my God, the seams must match exactly or the world will end people. And then there's the people who like, life's short. If they don't match exactly, I'm not going to go back and rip them out and keep doing them until they do. Neither way is right or wrong. It's what is most comfortable for you and what do you enjoy doing, okay? And so when you finish sewing, and I'm just going to sew this bit for you, okay? when finish sewing, oops, I gotta cut these. I gotta cut all the extra that I had. Okay. You open it out. Oops. And I flipped them. No, I didn't. Okay. I'm looking at it the opposite way. So I'm like, I flipped them. No. You're starting from here, and you open it out, and you can kind of see how your block builds. Remember, we're doing the up at this point. So you'd go, there's the dark, and then it moves up one. So you're going up. The way to remember the up and the down is, where's your dark piece? Where's your last piece? Is it going up in the pattern, or is it going down in the pattern? That's the easiest way to track it and make sure you're doing it right and you haven't hit the wrong one. So again, see, you can see it here. Track your dark piece. Helps if you turn. See why I keep flipping it around? Because you want them to do that. Track your dark piece. Here it's going up. And then here, your dark piece. Your last fabric. Pick a fabric is what I'm saying. If you've got one particular one you want to keep track of. And here it is, like I said, going down. And that's how you track this, so that you make sure you're getting that up-down motion is by looking at it, pick a fabric, track it, make sure it's going the right way as you make your block. I'm not going to sew them all together for you because, again, once you've got that done, once you've got them laid out, it's just straight sewing. Just sew your strips, sew your columns together to make your block, and you're done. So that's it for this edition. Next time we will get back to the tapestry quilt, so make sure you've got your sections all sewn together. We're not going to come back to this quilt until February because I only have 6 blocks done and I need 14. This will be my 7th, so I'll be halfway done. And that's all I've done so far. And so to get to the next step, I have to have them all done. So I need time. So that's where we are. So that's it for now. Again, we'll get back to this in February. So between now and February, sew your blocks if you're sewing along. If you're not, at least you've learned it. And we'll come back in February for the next step. I'm not going to abandon this. I hope to finish this winter. Everybody, I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you have a happy holiday season, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, happy Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate during this time. Happy very belated Diwali. Didn't want to forget that one. And I hope everybody just has a safe and happy holiday season, although I'll see you one more time this month. Don't forget to check the QR code at the end or the links in this links in the show notes to support this channel. Like, subscribe, share, everybody. Every little bit helps. Although, keep the comments nice. Don't tell me my videography is terrible. If you cannot see when I'm doing something, tell me that. Because again, I'm thinking of doing an episode where I go back and go, okay, here's all the things you didn't see before. Let me try to do this again so you can see it. But don't complain if it's not related to the quilting. Oh, I can't see you. Whatever. You don't need to see me. This is about the quilting. All right. So be constructive in your comments and things like, I'm just being nice and I thought you want to know. No, if it's not about the quilting, I don't want to know. And I know how that sounds, but this is my channel. But if you do want to support the channel, there'll be the Ko-fi links. You can buy stuff on my website, all of that sort of thing. So until next time, take care, and we will see you next time.